The war room of the Imperial Palace was filled with the greatest military minds in the Galactic Empire. They stood around a massive holographic display that showed the Orion arm of the galaxy. 47 star systems glowed in red, each one a conquest, each one a victory for the Empire. Supreme Admiral Kelvoth moved his hand across the display and zoomed in on a small yellow star. The third planet from that star appeared larger, spinning slowly in the projection. It was a beautiful world, covered in blue oceans and white clouds. The continents were green and brown, teeming with life. "This world is called Earth," Kelvoth said to the assembled generals. "Our scouts detected radio transmissions from this planet 6 cycles ago. The inhabitants call themselves humans. They are primitive. They have not achieved faster than light travel. They still use chemical propulsion for their spacecraft. Most of their weapons are based on explosive compounds and simple kinetic energy. They fight each other constantly, divided into nearly 200 separate nations." General Vorn, commander of the ground forces, studied the planet with interest. "How many humans are there?" he asked. "Approximately 8 billion, Kelvoth replied. "They are concentrated in urban centers. Their largest cities hold tens of millions each. They will be easy to control once we demonstrate our power. A few orbital strikes on military installations and they will surrender within days." The other officers nodded in agreement. This was how it always went. The Empire arrived, demonstrated superior force, and the primitive species submitted. Some fought back with their crude weapons, but it never lasted long. Once they saw Imperial shields deflect their attacks and Imperial weapons vaporize their defenses, they always surrendered. It was the logical choice. Fighting the Empire was like fighting a star itself. Emperor Valtros entered the war room and everyone bowed. He was an imposing figure, tall and covered in ceremonial armor that had been passed down through generations of rulers. He walked to the display and looked at Earth with calculating eyes. "This will be our 48th conquest," he said. "I want this world subjugated within one rotation of their planet. Make it quick and efficient. Use it as an example to other worlds in this region." "It will be done, my Emperor," Kelvoth said with confidence. But before they could continue the planning, the doors to the war room opened again. A messenger entered, looking nervous. "Forgive the interruption, my Emperor, but there is a ship requesting permission to land. It bears the markings of the Nomari." The room fell silent. The Nomari were legends. They were one of the oldest races in the galaxy, perhaps the oldest. They had achieved space travel when most species were still living in caves. They had technology that even the Empire could not understand. But the Nomari never interfered in galactic affairs. They observed, they recorded, but they never took sides in conflicts. They had not spoken to the Empire in over 1,000 years. "Allow them to land," Emperor Valtros said. "Bring their representative here." An hour later, Elder Sirath entered the war room. The Nomari was ancient beyond measure. His species lived for thousands of years, and Sirath was old even by their standards. He walked slowly, leaning on a staff that hummed with quiet energy. His eyes, large and dark, seemed to see through everything. He looked at the holographic display of Earth and then turned to face the Emperor. "You plan to invade the human world," Sirath said. It was not a question. "We do," Emperor Valtros replied. "And with respect, Elder Sirath, this is not a matter for the Nomari. You do not involve yourselves in the affairs of younger species." "That is correct," Sirath said. "We observe, we record. We do not interfere. But today I break that tradition because I must deliver a warning. Do not invade Earth, do not attack the humans. Turn your fleet away and leave that system alone." The military officers looked at each other in confusion. General Vorn stepped forward. "With respect, Elder Y, they are primitive. They pose no threat to the Empire." Sirath turned his ancient eyes to the general. "We have observed Earth for over 50,000 of your years. We have watched the humans evolve from simple hunters to a spacefaring species. We have studied them in ways you cannot imagine. We have run every simulation, every calculation, every possible outcome of conflict with them. And in every scenario where an advanced species attempts to conquer Earth, the result is the same. The invaders are destroyed." Supreme Admiral Kelvoth laughed. "Elder Sirath, surely you jest. Look at them." He gestured to the display, which now showed images of human cities and military forces. "They fight with bullets and bombs. Their largest vessels cannot leave their own atmosphere without massive effort. We have antimatter weapons. We have shields that can withstand their strongest explosives. We have conquered 47 worlds. What makes these humans so dangerous? That is the question we have asked ourselves for millennia, Sirath replied. And the answer is complex. Humans are adaptable in ways no other species has demonstrated. They are creative. They learn at an impossible rate. But most importantly, they are unified by threat. You see 200 nations and think they are divided. But when an external enemy threatens Earth, those divisions disappear. Every human becomes a soldier. Every mind turns to a single purpose, survival. Emperor Valtros waved his hand dismissively. The Nomari have grown cautious in your old age. You hide in your observatories and forget what true power looks like. The humans will submit or they will be destroyed. That is the way of the galaxy. Sirath looked at the Emperor with something that might have been sadness. I have delivered my warning. What you do with it is your choice. But know this. We have observed thousands of species across millions of years. We have seen empires rise and fall. We have watched civilizations that seemed eternal crumble to dust. And in all that time, in all those observations, we have never seen a species quite like the humans. You believe your technology makes you superior. But technology is not what wins wars. Determination wins wars. Adaptability wins wars. The will to survive at any cost wins wars. And the humans have those qualities in abundance. Your warning is noted, Emperor Valtros said coldly, but it will not change our plans. The invasion fleet will launch within the week. You may return to your people and continue your observations. Record what happens for your archives. Perhaps it will serve as a reminder that the Empire does not fear primitive species, no matter what ancient observers might predict. Elder Sirath bowed slowly. Then I have one final thing to say. When your fleet burns in Earth's atmosphere, when your soldiers fall on human soil, when your mighty empire learns humility at the hands of these primitives, remember that you were warned. Remember that you chose this path. He turned and walked from the war room, his staff tapping against the floor with each step. After he left, the military officers looked uncomfortable. General Vorn spoke first. My Emperor, the Nomari have never been wrong in their predictions. Perhaps we should consider— Enough, Emperor Valtros interrupted. The Nomari are cowards who hide behind their neutrality. They have forgotten what it means to have power. We will not be frightened away from a primitive world by vague warnings and ancient superstitions. Proceed with the invasion plans. I want 300 ships. I want 500,000 soldiers. And I want every species in this region of space to watch as we bring Earth to its knees. Let this be a lesson that will echo across the galaxy. The Galactic Empire bows to no one and fears nothing. The officers saluted and began making preparations. Within the week, the largest invasion fleet ever assembled by the Empire departed for Earth. Supreme Admiral Kelvoth stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars streak past as they entered faster than light travel. He thought about Elder Sirath's warning and dismissed it. The humans would fall just like every other primitive species had fallen. It was inevitable. It was the natural order of the galaxy. He had no way of knowing that he was leading his fleet to the greatest disaster in Imperial history. Captain Jake Morrison was flying his F-22 fighter jet over the Pacific Ocean when everything changed. It was supposed to be a routine patrol, the kind he had done hundreds of times before. The sky was clear and blue, the ocean stretching endlessly below him. His radar showed nothing unusual, just a few commercial aircraft far to the east and a cargo ship on the water. He was thinking about what he would have for dinner when he got back to base. Then every instrument in his cockpit went crazy. The radar screen filled with contacts, hundreds of them all appearing at once. They were descending from orbit, moving at speeds that should have been impossible. Jake's first thought was that his systems had malfunctioned, but then his radio crackled to life with urgent transmissions from air traffic control. They were seeing it too. Every military installation in the Pacific was tracking the same phenomenon. Objects were entering Earth's atmosphere from space, and they were slowing down in ways that defied physics. These were not meteorites. These were controlled descents. All aircraft, return to base immediately, the voice on the radio commanded. This is not a drill. Unknown objects entering atmosphere worldwide. All military personnel report to stations. Jake turned his fighter around and pushed the throttle forward. His heart was pounding. In all his years of service, he had never heard that tone in a controller's voice. It was fear, pure fear. As he flew back toward land, he looked up through his canopy and saw them. Shapes in the sky, dark against the blue, descending slowly. They were enormous, far larger than any aircraft humanity had ever built. And there were so many of them. Commander Alex Carter was aboard the International Space Station when humanity got its first clear view of the alien fleet. He had been conducting routine maintenance on the solar panels when Mission Control urgently called him back inside. He pulled himself through the airlock and floated to the observation window. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. The alien vessels were massive, each one several times larger than the space station itself. They moved with purpose and precision, spreading out across Earth's orbit. Some descended toward the planet while others took up positions above it. The ships were dark and angular, covered in what looked like armor plating. Lights pulsed along their hulls in patterns that suggested complex systems at work. "Alex, are you seeing this?" the voice from Mission Control asked unnecessarily. "I'm seeing it," Alex replied, his voice barely a whisper. "How many are there?" "We count 300 large vessels and countless smaller craft. They're taking positions above major population centers. New York, London, Moscow, Beijing, Tokyo, Delhi. Every major city on the planet has one of those things hanging over it." Alex watched as one of the massive ships positioned itself directly above North America. He could see the curvature of Earth below it and the ship above, a dark shadow against the stars. Humanity had dreamed of first contact with alien life for generations. They had built radio telescopes and sent messages into space. They had written stories and made films about this moment. But none of those dreams had looked like this. This was not peaceful exploration. This was an invasion. In Washington, President Linda Hayes was in an emergency meeting with her cabinet and military advisors. The Situation Room was filled with screens showing the alien vessels from every angle. Satellites, ground-based telescopes, and military installations around the world were feeding data into the command center. The president had been woken from sleep 2 hours ago with news that would change human history forever. She had immediately contacted world leaders. Russia, China, the European Union, India, every nation on Earth was facing the same crisis. For once, old conflicts and disagreements seemed meaningless. Humanity faced something far greater than their petty disputes. "Do we have any communication from them?" President Hayes asked. General Richard Blake, a man who had served in the military for 35 years, shook his head. "Nothing yet, Madam President. They've maintained complete radio silence, but their intentions seem clear. This is a military deployment. They've positioned their largest vessels over our major cities and military installations. Every capital city on Earth is currently sitting under one of those ships." "How long until they're in position?" the president asked. "They already are," General Blake replied grimly. "Whatever they're planning, they're ready to execute it." As if in response to his words, every screen in the Situation Room suddenly changed. The feeds from satellites and cameras were replaced by a single image. An alien face appeared, looking directly at them. The creature was humanoid, but clearly not human. Its skin was pale gray, its eyes were larger than human eyes and completely black. It had no visible nose, just small slits where nostrils would be. When it spoke, its mouth moved in ways that seemed wrong. But the voice that came out was perfect English. "People of Earth," the alien said. "I am Supreme Admiral Kelvoth of the Galactic Empire. Your world is now under Imperial jurisdiction. You have 1 rotation of your planet, 24 of your hours to surrender unconditionally. All military forces must stand down. All governments must transfer authority to Imperial administration. If you comply, your people will be integrated into the Empire peacefully. If you resist, your cities will be destroyed, and your species will be subjugated by force. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. You have 24 hours. The transmission ended and the normal feeds returned." The Situation Room was silent for a long moment. President Hayes looked around at the faces of her advisors. She saw shock, fear, and anger, but she also saw determination. These were people who had dedicated their lives to protecting their nation and their world. They were not going to give up without a fight. "Get me every world leader on a secure line," the president said firmly. "We need a unified response. And get our best scientists analyzing every bit of data we have on those ships. I want to know what we're dealing with." Within an hour, a video conference was established with leaders from every major nation. The transmission was encrypted and routed through multiple secure channels. President Hayes looked at the faces on the screen. The Premier of China, the President of Russia, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, leaders from India, Brazil, Japan, Germany, France, and dozens of other nations. They were rivals in peacetime, competitors for resources and influence. But today they were something else. They were representatives of the human race. We've all seen the same message, President Hayes began. We all face the same choice. I think we all know what our answer must be. The Premier of China spoke next. Humanity did not claw its way to the top of the food chain on this planet just to surrender to invaders from space. We will not submit. Agreed, said the Russian president. Our nations have fought each other for generations, but we are all human. Today we stand together. One by one, every leader gave the same answer. Humanity would not surrender. They would fight. The differences between nations, the old hatreds and conflicts, none of it mattered anymore. An external threat had done what centuries of diplomacy could not. It had united Earth. Dr. Karen White was pulled from her laboratory at MIT and rushed to a military installation in Colorado. She was one of the world's leading physicists, specializing in theoretical propulsion systems and energy fields. Now her expertise was needed for something far more urgent than theory. She was escorted into a command center filled with scientists and military personnel. On the screens around her were detailed sensor readings of the alien vessels. Dr. White, thank you for coming so quickly, General Blake said. We need you to analyze these ships. We need to know what we're up against. Karen studied the data carefully. The alien vessels were using some form of energy field as protection, what appeared to be shields like in science fiction movies. Their propulsion system was beyond anything Earth had developed. But as she looked closer, she noticed something interesting. The aliens were moving in formations that were rigid and predictable. They followed precise geometric patterns. Their approach had been textbook perfect, exactly what you would expect from a military force following established doctrine. They're powerful, Karen said finally. Their technology is far beyond ours, but they're also predictable. They're following standard military procedures. They think they've already won. They're not adapting to us because they don't think they need to. Can we fight them? General Blake asked. Karen looked at the massive alien ships on the screen. By every logical measure, humanity should surrender. They were outmatched in every way. But then she thought about human history, about every time humanity had faced impossible odds. She thought about the determination she saw in the faces around her. I don't know if we can win, she said honestly, but I know we can fight. And if we fight smart, if we use every advantage we have, we might surprise them. The 24-hour deadline approached. Across Earth, military forces mobilized. Soldiers reported to bases, pilots climbed into cockpits, sailors took ships to sea. Cities were evacuated as best they could be. Civilians who had nowhere to go took shelter in basements and underground bunkers. The world held its breath and waited. When the deadline passed, President Hayes broadcast Earth's response to the alien fleet. Her message was simple and clear. To the Galactic Empire, humanity rejects your ultimatum. We will not surrender our world. We will not submit to your rule. If you want Earth, you will have to take it from us. And we promise you this. We will make you pay for every inch. In orbit, Supreme Admiral Kelvoth received the message and smiled. Finally, a species with some spirit. It would make their defeat all the more satisfying. He gave the order his fleet had been waiting for. Begin the assault. Supreme Admiral Kelvoth decided to begin with a demonstration of power. He would destroy a human military installation completely, leaving nothing but a crater. The other humans would see what happened when they defied the Empire. He selected a target in the desert region of Nevada, a place the humans called Nellis Air Force Base. It was isolated from major population centers but large enough to serve as an example. He sent a squadron of 12 Imperial fighters to vaporize it. Colonel Ryan Martinez had been expecting this. He knew the aliens would want to demonstrate their power before launching a full invasion. He had spent the last 20 hours evacuating everyone from Nellis and turning the base into a trap. Every building was rigged with explosives. Every hangar contained fuel barrels ready to create massive fireballs. And surrounding the base, hidden in the desert and underground, were every missile battery and artillery piece he could gather. When the alien fighters descended through the clouds, they found what looked like an abandoned base. They began their attack run, energy weapons charging. Ryan gave the order and hell erupted from the desert. Surface-to-air missiles launched from dozens of hidden positions. Artillery opened fire with conventional and experimental rounds. The aliens had shields, but they were designed to handle energy weapons and explosives of certain yields. The humans threw everything they had, overwhelming the shields with sheer volume. 3 alien fighters took direct hits and fell from the sky, crashing into the desert in balls of flame. The remaining fighters scattered, surprised by the intensity of the response. They had expected token resistance, not a coordinated ambush. One damaged fighter tried to limp back to orbit. Ryan watched it through binoculars and smiled grimly. The aliens had lost their first craft. They could be hurt. They could die. That information was worth more than the base they had sacrificed. Kelvoth was stunned when he received the report. 3 fighters lost in the first engagement. These were not supposed to be losses. These were supposed to be easy victories. He increased the assault, sending entire squadrons to attack military targets across the planet. If the humans wanted a real war, he would give them one. Orbital bombardments began, targeting bases and command centers. Energy beams lanced down from space, turning installations into molten craters. But humanity had learned from history. They had studied every war ever fought. They knew that concentrating forces made them vulnerable. Military assets had been dispersed and hidden. For every base destroyed, 2 more opened fire from unexpected locations. The aliens found that destroying one target did not stop human resistance. It seemed to make it stronger. Lieutenant Amy Foster was 26 years old and had been flying fighter jets for 4 years. She had trained for combat against other human pilots, never imagining she would face aliens. Her F-35 had been modified overnight, with experimental weapons that scientists hoped might penetrate alien shields. She led a squadron of 8 fighters against a formation of alien craft that were attacking targets in California. The aliens were faster and more maneuverable, their technology decades ahead of human engineering. But Amy and her pilots had something the aliens did not have: creativity born of desperation. They used the terrain, flying low through mountain valleys where the larger alien craft could not follow easily. They used decoys, sending drones ahead to draw fire while the real fighters attacked from different angles. Amy herself led a risky maneuver, sending an unmanned drone on a collision course with an alien fighter. When the alien's shields activated to deflect the drone, Amy fired her missiles at the exact moment the shields were concentrated on the wrong direction. The missiles struck home and the alien fighter exploded. Her squadron managed to down 4 alien craft before retreating. They lost 3 drones and 1 pilot who ejected safely. As Amy flew back to base, she realized something important. The aliens were following doctrine. They fought by the book, using standard formations and predictable tactics. Humans were making it up as they went, trying anything that might work. That unpredictability was an advantage. On the ground, the fighting was even more brutal. Sergeant Danny Cole and his Marine unit were defending Chicago when alien ground forces landed. The aliens were impressive, standing over 7 feet tall in powered armor that made them look like walking tanks. They carried weapons that fired beams of concentrated energy. A single shot could cut through a concrete wall. The alien soldiers advanced in perfect formation, confident in their superiority. Danny and his Marines had prepared the city for urban warfare. Every building was a potential fortress. Every intersection was a kill zone. The aliens might have better weapons and armor, but they did not know the streets like the humans did. As the alien formation marched down Michigan Avenue, the Marines struck from every direction. Rocket launchers fired from upper-story windows. Machine gun nests opened up from behind barricades. Snipers took shots at gaps in the alien armor. The aliens responded with overwhelming firepower, but the Marines had already moved to new positions. This was not the kind of warfare the Empire was used to. They expected lines of battle and clear objectives. Instead, they got chaos. Every building could contain enemies. Every pile of rubble could hide an ambush. The aliens advanced slowly, taking casualties with each block. Dr. Karen White and her team worked without sleep, analyzing every piece of alien technology they could get their hands on. The wreckage from downed fighters was brought to laboratories around the world. Scientists dissected the alien systems, trying to understand how they worked. Karen focused on the shield technology. It was based on principles that were theoretically possible, but far beyond Earth's current capabilities. However, understanding something and replicating it were different challenges. What Karen could do was find weaknesses. She discovered that the alien shields operated on specific frequencies. They were incredibly effective against energy weapons and conventional explosives. Because those threats produced energy signatures the shields were designed to counter. But the shields had to cycle, had to adjust to different threats. If you hit them with multiple different types of weapons simultaneously, you could overload them. The shields would try to adapt to everything at once and fail. Karen immediately sent her findings to military commanders worldwide. Within hours, new tactics were being implemented. Mixed weapon attacks became standard. Conventional missiles paired with electromagnetic pulse weapons. Kinetic projectiles followed by laser designators and explosive rounds. The alien shields began failing more often. In Beijing, Captain Liu Zhang commanded a unit that used these new tactics to devastating effect. His forces drew alien armor into a prepared kill zone and hit them with everything at once. Missiles, artillery, electromagnetic weapons, and conventional fire all struck within seconds. The alien shields flickered and failed. For the first time, human forces destroyed an entire alien ground unit. Commander Alex Carter, still aboard the space station, watched the battle unfold below. From orbit, he could see the alien ships positioning for bombardments. He could also see something else. A rocket was launching from Kazakhstan, an unscheduled launch that carried experimental weapons. The payload reached orbit and docked with the space station. Inside were railguns, weapons designed for theoretical space warfare that humanity had never expected to use. Alex and his crew mounted the railguns on the station's exterior. The weapons were simple in concept. Use electromagnetic force to accelerate solid projectiles to extreme velocities. In space, without atmosphere to slow them down, these projectiles would strike with enormous force. The alien shields were designed for energy weapons. Solid projectiles were something different. Alex targeted an alien cruiser that was preparing to bombard Sydney. He fired the railgun and watched through the station's cameras as the projectile streaked across space. It struck the alien ship's shield, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the shield collapsed from the kinetic impact, and the projectile punched through the hull. The alien cruiser began venting atmosphere, forced to retreat from its attack position. Across the globe, humanity was learning to fight an enemy far more advanced than themselves. In South America, resistance fighters used jungle terrain to ambush alien patrols. In Europe, coordinated strikes from multiple nations overwhelmed alien positions. In Africa, innovative tactics turned alien advantages into vulnerabilities. The internet, which the aliens had tried to shut down, had been replaced by a distributed network that could not be destroyed. Information flowed freely. A tactic that worked in Tokyo was being used in London within hours. A weakness discovered in Moscow was exploited in New York minutes later. The humans were fighting as a unified species, sharing everything, holding nothing back. Every soldier, every scientist, every civilian contributed to the war effort. Factories that made cars were now making weapons. Civilians who had never fired a gun were learning to fight. The old divisions between nations had not disappeared, but they had been set aside. There would be time for politics later. Now there was only survival. Supreme Admiral Kelvoth reviewed the casualty reports with growing concern. In 3 days of fighting, his invasion force had lost over 50 ships and thousands of soldiers. The humans were supposed to be defeated by now. Instead, they were fighting harder than ever. Their tactics were unpredictable. Their resistance was fierce, and somehow they were learning from every engagement. His officers were requesting reinforcements. Some were even suggesting a temporary retreat to regroup. Kelvoth refused to consider retreat. The Empire did not retreat from primitive species. He would break these humans and make them an example. He ordered increased bombardments and sent more troops to the surface. But deep inside, for the first time in his long military career, Kelvoth felt something unfamiliar. It was doubt. The Nomari had warned him. Elder Sirath had said the humans were dangerous. Kelvoth had dismissed it as cowardice. Now, watching his forces struggle against an enemy that should have been helpless, he wondered if the ancient race had seen something he had missed. On Earth, humanity prepared for the next phase of the war. They had survived the initial assault. They had proven they could fight back. Now came the hard part, turning survival into victory. 3 weeks into the invasion, Supreme Admiral Kelvoth stood on the bridge of his flagship and faced a truth he had never imagined. The human resistance was not weakening. It was growing stronger. Every day brought new casualties to his fleet. Every engagement revealed new human tactics. They were learning at a rate that should not have been possible. His military advisors were recommending withdrawal, but Kelvoth could not accept that. The Empire did not withdraw from battles against primitive species. Yet the reports kept coming. Another cruiser damaged, another ground unit destroyed, another squadron forced to retreat. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Bennett had spent her entire naval career aboard submarines. She had trained for warfare against other human vessels, learning to hunt in silence beneath the waves. Now she commanded the USS Valiant, a nuclear submarine that had been modified for a mission that everyone said was impossible. Submarines could not fight spacecraft. The two domains were completely separate. But Sarah had studied the alien tactics and noticed something. The alien cruisers would descend to low altitude when conducting bombardments of coastal targets. They came down close to the ocean to ensure accuracy. That was a mistake. Sarah positioned her submarine off the coast of Florida, waiting for the right moment. An alien cruiser began its approach, descending to 5,000 feet above the water to bombard the Kennedy Space Center. Sarah gave the order and the Valiant surfaced rapidly. Hatches opened and every missile in her arsenal launched in rapid succession. 24 missiles, each tipped with a nuclear warhead, streaked upward at the alien ship. The alien shields were powerful, designed to withstand attacks from space-based weapons and energy beams. But they had never been tested against a concentrated nuclear barrage launched from the ocean directly below. The first missiles detonated against the shields, creating enormous fireballs. The shields held, but they were designed to dissipate energy in specific directions, mostly outward into space. The underwater launch angle was wrong for their defensive calculations. As more missiles struck, the shields began to overload. The final 3 missiles penetrated the weakened defenses and detonated against the hull itself. The alien cruiser, larger than an aircraft carrier, shuddered from the impacts. Hull plating tore away. Internal systems failed. The massive vessel began to fall, unable to maintain altitude. It crashed into the Atlantic Ocean with an impact that created a wave visible from space. Sarah watched through the periscope as the alien ship sank beneath the waves, trailing debris and escaping atmosphere. It was the first capital ship humanity had destroyed, and the victory sent a message to every human soldier and every alien commander. The Empire could be beaten. In orbit, Commander Alex Carter and his crew had turned the International Space Station into something its designers never imagined. The experimental railguns had proven effective, and more were being sent up with each supply mission. The station was no longer just an observation platform. It was a weapons platform. Alex coordinated with ground forces, tracking alien movements and striking targets of opportunity. When an alien transport ship began descending toward Europe, carrying reinforcements for ground forces, Alex targeted it with 3 railgun shots. The solid projectiles tore through the ship's shields and hull, crippling it before it could reach the surface. But Alex knew the station itself was vulnerable. The aliens had to realize by now that it was being used against them. He expected them to attack at any moment. His crew prepared for that eventuality, ready to evacuate if necessary. But they would fight as long as they could. Every shot they fired was one less threat to the people below. Dr. Karen White made a breakthrough that would change the course of the war. Her team had been studying captured alien shield generators for days, taking them apart piece by piece. The technology was far more advanced than anything Earth possessed, but the principles were understandable. The shields created a field of energy that deflected or absorbed incoming attacks. But to do this, they had to detect the threat first, analyze it, and respond appropriately. That process happened in microseconds, but it was still a process, and processes could be disrupted. Karen designed a weapon specifically to overload alien shields. It was an electromagnetic pulse device, but not like the ones humanity already possessed. This one operated on frequencies that she had identified as critical to the alien shield systems. When fired, it would confuse the shield generators, making them think they were under attack from multiple directions simultaneously. The shields would try to adapt to everything at once and collapse from the overload. Prototypes were built within 48 hours. Manufacturing facilities around the world, working together with shared designs, began mass production. Within a week, every military unit on Earth would have access to weapons designed specifically to counter alien defenses. The Empire's technological advantage was shrinking. Major Chris Anderson in Johannesburg received one of the first electromagnetic pulse weapons and immediately put it to use. His unit had been fighting alien ground forces for weeks, taking heavy casualties despite clever tactics. Now he had a weapon that could level the battlefield. When alien armor advanced on his position, Chris ordered his soldiers to fire the new weapons first. The alien shields flickered and died, leaving the soldiers vulnerable to conventional weapons. The humans opened fire with everything they had. The alien unit was destroyed in minutes. Chris shared his success with other commanders through the distributed network. Within hours, similar tactics were being used in Delhi, Shanghai, Paris, and Los Angeles. The aliens began taking heavier casualties. Their advantage in personal armor and shielding was gone. Captain Liu Jiang in China coordinated a massive counterattack using the new weapons. He gathered forces from multiple units, Chinese, Russian, and Korean soldiers fighting together. They struck an alien stronghold that had been considered impregnable. The electromagnetic pulse weapons disabled the alien shields, and conventional forces overwhelmed the position. It was the first time humans had successfully taken an alien-held position, rather than just defending against attacks. Lieutenant Amy Foster continued to lead airstrikes against alien forces. Her squadron had grown as more pilots joined from bases around the world. Some flew American aircraft, others flew Russian, Chinese, or European jets. It did not matter anymore. They were all human pilots fighting the same enemy. Amy developed tactics that specifically exploited the electromagnetic pulse weapons. Her fighters would coordinate with ground forces, hitting alien ships with the new weapons to drop their shields, then following up with missiles and cannon fire. In one engagement over the Pacific, Amy's squadron encountered a formation of 12 alien fighters. The odds were even, but the aliens had better technology. Amy used the new tactics, having half her squadron fire electromagnetic pulse weapons while the other half prepared conventional missiles. The alien shields collapsed simultaneously across the entire formation, and the prepared missiles found their marks. 6 alien fighters were destroyed in the opening seconds. The remaining 6 broke formation and fled. Sergeant Danny Cole and his Marines had been fighting in Chicago for 3 weeks. The city was in ruins, but it was still in human hands. The aliens had tried repeatedly to take it, seeing it as strategically important, but Danny and thousands of other soldiers had turned every street into a battlefield. Now armed with electromagnetic pulse weapons, they went on the offensive. They pushed the aliens back block by block, building by building. The fighting was brutal and close, but for the first time, the humans were advancing instead of just holding ground. Danny's unit cleared a building that aliens had been using as a command post. Inside, they found alien computers and communication equipment. All of it was captured intact and sent to intelligence teams. Every piece of alien technology that fell into human hands was studied and used against them. The humans were not just fighting. They were learning and adapting faster than the Empire could respond. Around the world, the momentum of the war was shifting. The aliens still had more ships and better technology, but they were facing an enemy that refused to quit. An enemy that learned from every mistake and shared every victory. An enemy that had put aside centuries of conflict to fight as one species. The Global Resistance Network coordinated actions across continents. When a weakness was discovered in Tokyo, it was exploited in Berlin within the hour. When a tactic worked in Rio de Janeiro, it was being used in Moscow before the day ended. Emperor Valtros received reports of the deteriorating situation and was furious. He demanded to know how primitive humans were defeating his fleet. His advisors had no good answers. The humans were using their own captured technology against them. They were adapting to imperial tactics faster than the Empire could adapt to human unpredictability. The casualty reports were shocking. Over 100 ships lost, tens of thousands of soldiers dead, and still the humans fought on. Valtros considered sending reinforcements, but he faced a new problem. Other species across the Empire were watching the battle. They saw that the mighty Imperial fleet was struggling against a pre-spaceflight civilization. If the Empire showed weakness, rebellions might break out on subjugated worlds. The Emperor could not afford to appear vulnerable, but he also could not afford to lose Earth. He ordered Kelvoth to finish the invasion quickly, using whatever force was necessary. Kelvoth knew what that meant. Total bombardment. Destroy the human cities from orbit and break their will to fight. It was a brutal tactic, one that would kill billions, but the Empire had used it before. He prepared to give the order, but something made him hesitate. The Nomari had warned them. Elder Sirith had said that invading Earth would lead to the destruction of the invaders. So far, the humans had exceeded every expectation. What would they do if pushed to the brink of extinction? Kelvoth did not know, and that uncertainty frightened him more than any weapon. He decided on one final assault before resorting to genocide. He would lead it himself with his flagship and the best remaining ships in his fleet. They would strike at the human capital, destroy their government, and break their resistance. It would be overwhelming force applied precisely. The humans would have no choice but to surrender. Kelvoth began planning the attack on Washington, unaware that the humans were already preparing for exactly this scenario. Emperor Valtros watched the battle reports from his throne world with growing horror. The invasion of Earth had been underway for 47 days and his fleet was being destroyed. Half of the 300 ships he had sent were gone, either destroyed completely or damaged beyond combat capability. The humans had started with primitive weapons and no space fleet. Now they were using captured alien technology, reverse-engineered shield disruptors, and tactics that his military academies had never considered. Worse, other species across the Empire were watching. Rebellions were already starting on 3 subjugated worlds. If the Empire could not defeat pre-spaceflight humans, what did that say about Imperial power? Supreme Admiral Kelvoth knew this was his last chance. If he failed, the Emperor would recall him in disgrace, assuming he survived. He planned one massive assault that would break human resistance forever. His flagship, the Eternal Dominion, was the most powerful vessel in the fleet. It was 3 miles long, armed with weapons that could level cities and protected by shields that had never been penetrated. He would take the Eternal Dominion and every combat-capable ship remaining in the fleet directly to the human capital. They would destroy Washington and decapitate the human government. Without leadership, without coordination, the human resistance would collapse. General Richard Blake studied intelligence reports in the Pentagon and knew the aliens would come for Washington. It was the logical target. The humans had been preparing for this moment since the invasion began. Every available weapon system had been positioned around the capital. Every soldier who could be spared from other fronts had been brought to defend the city. The civilians had been evacuated as much as possible, though millions chose to stay and fight. If this was where humanity made its stand, they wanted to be part of it. Dr. Karen White and her team worked frantically to provide every advantage they could. They had refined the electromagnetic pulse weapons to be even more effective against alien shields. They had analyzed the energy signatures of the Eternal Dominion itself and found potential weak points. The flagship's shields were incredibly powerful, but they drew enormous energy from the ship's reactor. If that reactor could be disrupted even for a moment, the shields would fail. Karen shared this information with every military commander. The battle plan was built around exploiting that single weakness. Captain Jake Morrison stood beside his fighter jet at Andrews Air Force Base. He had been flying missions against the aliens since the first day of the invasion. His aircraft had been shot up and repaired more times than he could count. He had lost friends, seen cities burn, and witnessed horrors that would haunt him forever. But he was still here, still fighting. Around him, dozens of other pilots prepared their aircraft. They were American, British, French, Japanese, Russian, Chinese, and more. They represented every nation on Earth. Today, they would fly together against the alien flagship. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Bennett had brought the USS Valiant and 5 other submarines into position around the Potomac River and Chesapeake Bay. It seemed insane to think that submarines could contribute to a battle against spacecraft, but she had proven before that unexpected tactics worked against the aliens. Her submarines carried every missile they could hold, including the new electromagnetic pulse weapons. When the alien flagship came within range, they would fire everything. Commander Alex Carter and the crew of the International Space Station had one final mission. The station itself was nearly out of weapons and supplies. They had been told to evacuate, but Alex and his crew refused. They had a clear line of sight to where the alien flagship would be. They had 3 railgun projectiles left. They would use them when the moment was right, even if it meant the aliens would destroy the station in retaliation. Supreme Admiral Kelvoth led his fleet into Earth's atmosphere with confidence. He had 138 ships, including the Eternal Dominion. The humans had nothing that could stand against such force. He had watched them fight, and he had to admit they were resourceful, but resourcefulness had limits. Today he would show them the true power of the Galactic Empire. His ships descended toward Washington in perfect formation, weapons charging, shields at maximum strength. The battle began with a coordinated strike from every direction at once. Missiles launched from hidden positions around the city. Artillery fired from fortified positions. The electromagnetic pulse weapons activated, targeting the alien shields. The aliens had expected an attack, but not the sheer volume. Hundreds of weapons struck the fleet simultaneously. Smaller escort ships had their shields overloaded immediately and were torn apart by follow-up strikes. The larger cruisers held longer, but one by one their defenses failed. Lieutenant Amy Foster led her squadron of fighters directly at the Eternal Dominion. The massive flagship was too large and too well protected for any normal attack to damage it. But Amy was not making a normal attack. Her squadron fired electromagnetic pulse weapons at specific points on the shield, points that Dr. Karen White had identified as crucial to the shield's stability. As the pulses struck, the shield flickered. It did not fail, but it flickered. That was the signal. From the water below, Sarah Bennett and her submarine force launched every missile they possessed. Over 100 missiles streaked upward, all targeting the Eternal Dominion. The alien point defense systems tried to shoot them down, but there were too many coming from too many angles. The missiles struck the shield while it was still recovering from the electromagnetic pulse attack. The shield held, but the strain was enormous. From orbit, Commander Alex Carter fired 2 of his 3 remaining railgun projectiles. The solid slugs, traveling at tremendous velocity, hit the shield from above. The impact was different from energy weapons or missiles. The shield tried to dissipate kinetic energy, but the projectiles were too massive, moving too fast. The shield's energy consumption spiked. Inside the Eternal Dominion, Kelvoth watched in shock as his shield indicators went critical. The humans were attacking from the ground, from the sea, from the air, and from space, all at the exact same moment. They were targeting his shields from multiple angles with multiple weapon types. It was perfect coordination of forces that should not have been possible for such a primitive species. His shield generators were overheating, drawing more power than the reactor could safely provide. Captain Jake Morrison saw the shield flicker again and knew this was the moment. He armed the experimental weapon his fighter carried, a focused energy beam that Dr. Karen White's team had built using captured alien technology. It was powered by a miniaturized reactor that would burn out after one shot. But Jake only needed one shot. He dove toward the Eternal Dominion, every instinct screaming at him to pull away from the massive ship. He ignored his fear and locked onto the shield generator that satellite scans had identified. He fired. The beam struck the shield generator just as it was already overloaded from defending against attacks from every direction. The generator exploded, creating a cascade failure. One generator failed, then another, then all of them. The shields around the Eternal Dominion collapsed completely. For the first time since it was built, the flagship was vulnerable. General Richard Blake gave the order, and every weapon system around Washington fired at once. Nuclear missiles, conventional explosives, railgun rounds, energy weapons, everything humanity had. The Eternal Dominion without its shields could not withstand the barrage. Explosions tore across its hull. Systems failed throughout the ship. The massive vessel began to fall, no longer able to maintain altitude. Kelvoth tried to give orders, but half his crew was dead and the other half was trying to abandon ship. The bridge was filled with smoke and sparks. He watched through the cracked view screen as the ground rushed up to meet them. The Eternal Dominion crashed into the Potomac River with an impact that registered on seismographs hundreds of miles away. The explosion from the ship's reactor created a mushroom cloud visible from 3 states. Sergeant Danny Cole and his Marines were among the first to reach the crash site. They pulled survivors from the wreckage, including Supreme Admiral Kelvoth himself. The alien commander was injured but alive. As Danny placed restraints on him, Kelvoth looked up at the human soldier with confusion and something that might have been respect. "How?" he asked in broken English. "How did primitives defeat the Empire?" Danny looked at the burning wreckage of the flagship and then back at the alien admiral. "You thought we were divided. You saw different nations and different people and thought we were weak. You did not understand that when someone threatens Earth, when someone tries to take our home, we do not stay divided. We become one. Every human on this planet fought you. Every mind worked on defeating you. You fought an army. We fought as a species. The remaining alien ships in orbit, seeing their flagship destroyed and their admiral captured, made the decision to retreat. They had lost. A pre-spaceflight civilization had defeated the Galactic Empire. The surviving ships jumped to faster than light speed and fled the system. Of the 300 ships that had arrived, only 38 escaped Earth. Across the planet, humans watched the alien fleet retreat and realized they had won. Cities erupted in celebration even as they counted their losses. Millions had died in the fighting. Entire neighborhoods had been destroyed. But Earth was still free. Humanity had defended their home against impossible odds. President Linda Hayes addressed the world from a secure location. The White House had been damaged in the battle, but she was alive and so was most of her government. Today we prove something that will echo across the galaxy. Earth is not a world to be conquered. Humanity is not a species that surrenders. We took our first steps into a larger universe, and we took those steps as defenders of our home. Let every species among the stars know this. We are humans, and we bow to no one. The Nomari, who had observed everything from their distant ships, sent a message to every species in the galaxy. Earth was under their protection. Any attack on humanity would be considered an attack on the Nomari themselves. It was a lie. The Nomari had no intention of actually fighting, but it was a necessary lie. They had seen what the humans were capable of when threatened. They wanted to ensure humanity had time to develop in peace. The Galactic Empire would eventually recover from their defeat, but they would never forget the lesson Earth taught them. Technology alone did not determine the outcome of wars. Determination, adaptability, and unity mattered more. A decree was issued throughout the Empire. Earth was forbidden territory. No Imperial ship would enter that system again. On Earth, humanity began to rebuild and to reach for the stars with new confidence.